true clarity, it just doesn't come from introspection, but like from interacting with people whose experience really stretch us. And I think like the main message I wanted people to take away from that TEDx was how the labels function in our world is not where we should focus our attention. Our attention should really be on becoming more of the best of who we are and using that in our connection with others. So we create like a more unified world.
Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Hello and welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and always happy to be here. That's a constant.
Absolutely. Welcome back. Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast Leadership Story Talks wherever you find your podcasts. Check out our YouTube channel if you want to see us in glorious technical color and multiple dimensions. You'll find a lot of information in this episode's notes as well. So I really encourage you to look at those and click on the links. There'll be lots of resources. And of course, go to narrative.com, narativ.com/podcast, which is bringing you this podcast. And that's where you can find all of our previous episodes. At this point, we've got more than 155 and counting. So I'm very, very happy to introduce today our guest. We are joined by LaNysha Adams, Dr. LaNysha Adams, who's a TEDx speaker, 10-time award-winning author of Me Power, and Director of Student Wellness at Santa Fe Community College. Whether you're pivoting careers or figuring out what's next, her Me Power framework, which we're going to talk about today, teaches you to tap into your own agency. So every step you take is aligned and powerful. And don't we want that all? So thanks for being here, LaNysha. It's really wonderful to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor to be with you guys.
Yeah. Well, I want to kick us off the way we always do on this podcast. Our listeners will be very familiar with this question, and we're going to put that to you as well. What is an experience that has shaped who you are today?
The number one experience that shaped who I am at this moment is my survival of a sudden cardiac arrest. It's actually called sudden cardiac death. About 9 in 10 people who have this cardiac arrest outside of a hospital typically will die. So in January 2022, my entire family contracted COVID. It was the first time that we got it. And Omicron was raging during that time. And, for 2 weeks, I think I was the sickest I've ever been in my life, in between coughs and chills that shook pretty much every fiber of my being. I don't really remember much, but when after 3 weeks, I felt so great. And this day that I had the sudden cardiac arrest, it was the best day I felt the whole year. Is like wild. And my husband said, you're really stressed about finishing your book. Why don't you don't cook, we just relax tonight. I'll go get pizza. And so he went to grab pizza and I sat down on the couch to close my eyes. And a week later, I woke up in the ICU.
Wow. Okay.
So when I woke up, I learned that my husband returned with the pizza, performed CPR, thereby saving my life. And I had COVID pneumonia, which is what led to the cardiac arrest. The virus attacked my heart, and now I have a heart condition that I have to manage. But when the first responders arrived, I learned that they worked on me for some time before getting my heart back into a regular rhythm. So I think it was like half an hour. And I think this experience really kind of puts me forefront of my mind, like what life means and how short it can be for a lot of us.
Yeah, and I would imagine what really matters. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that sort of how you came out of this experience, and with a kind of renewed focus on something that mattered to you, or what was the sort of consequence after that?
Yeah, I think the consequence is that I don't take any moment for granted. I think before it's so easy to do it, like, as we go through life, like, "Oh, in 5 years, I'm gonna accomplish this, and, you know, 10 years, I wanna foresee myself doing whatever." I don't think like that. I think I used to really kinda bank on, "Oh, I have more time," and now I really every day I wake up, I'm like, "I really am grateful that I get to take another breath to be here."
Mm, mm, yeah.
I really do think like that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Really appreciate it. And I want to get into the way that I introduced you, the Me Power framework. But I also talked about you being a TEDx speaker, and that's kind of how I came to know your work. Actually, a colleague of ours that we share in common told me about you, and that's the first thing I saw about you. I wonder if you could share a little bit with our listeners about what the TEDx is about.
Yeah, so it's really about, how connection with others deepens our understanding of ourselves. And that's kind of like a flip on the idea, like, you're
Absolutely.
connecting with others, you really have to be genuine in the connection, you really have to care about the other person, and also, like, who are you showing up as in that? And I make this argument, or I try to showcase in the short time that I did give the talk, that true clarity, it just doesn't come from introspection, but like from interacting with people whose experience really stretch us. And I think, like, the main message I wanted people to take away from that TEDx was how the labels function in our world is not where we should focus our attention. Our attention should really be on becoming more of the best of who we are, and using that in our connection with others, so we
Mm,
create like a more unified world. And I call that, a lot of things. I have a lot of words to describe this. Radical interrogation is one of them, but I really wanted to emphasize that in the talk.
yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and it's very effective. I really encourage everybody to go and look for that TEDx, and we'll obviously put that in the episode notes as well, so you have direct links to it. But I'm curious about this idea, LaNysha, of kind of trying to get away from labels, or perhaps the prison of labels, and even not just to the outside world, but to ourselves mainly. Right? This is my title, therefore this is how I'm supposed to act or not act, or and it's what is brought to my mind with this. Before we started recording, I mentioned that I was at a conference a couple days ago in Santa Fe, in your neck of the woods, and there were a lot of people from the HR community there, and really talking about people oriented issues and challenges, etc. And one of the gentlemen who was speaking there, talked about, which is something we talk a lot about, bringing your whole self to work. And I wonder, how does that sort of align with that idea? Because that is an idea that we hear a lot about, and to me, it's not always clear how we define that. It's one thing to say, bring your whole self to work, but what exactly does that mean practically? And so I wonder if your idea of bringing the best of who you are and trying to not be, imprisoned by labels that we create and free ourselves of that, does that sort of align with this idea of bringing your whole self to work, or are these two different things?
I think it's similar. I think it's different because, sometimes it's not safe to bring your whole self to work.
Mm,
I'm the director of the Student Wellness Center here at the community college, and one of the things that I'm hyper focused on all the time is psychological safety. So when it's safe, you can bring your whole self to work. I create, like, conditions where my staff, they light up, they feel so emboldened to be who they are, and I support that, and that's beautiful. But when they interact with some other people, or if they had a different supervisor, maybe that's not the best strategic move. So what I'm talking about is like wherever you go, there you are. It's like this idea, like, you can't ever really get away from you. But I think a lot of us, we use the roles that we play as like our primary focus. And I think these roles that we play are very important, whatever title you have. Maybe you're a husband, a dad, and you're a friend, and you're a colleague, and you're a podcast host, and you have all these different containers, right, of how you're being held um in those contexts. But I feel like the point that I'm making and underscoring is like when we over identify with a role, we risk forgetting who we are outside of it. And this creates a lot of stress, right? Because if you over identify with the role, when you leave that job, you get canned. They have layoffs. You become an empty nester. You have to go into a new opportunity that requires a different version of yourself, right? If you're tethered so tightly to that role, to the label, then you're on unstable ground. And I think like where I feel like I really want to like emphasize this idea is like you have to remember, I think we all have to remember that we are the constant throughout that change. Now the flip side and the paradox is that we as people, we're not fixed. A lot of people believe that like because of my personality I can't do this, I can't make change. But we are the constant, and like roles change, seasons change, but the power that's inside of us, how we choose to show up, what we choose to focus on, what we create, the story we tell ourselves and the stories that we share with the world, that is all by choice, and like we get to decide. And so I really that's what I would say to answer that question.
I love it. Thank you.
So I'm raising my hand to anybody who's on the radio where we're going to abide to school rules right now. Um, what what you just said resonate with me is tremendously because I do a lot of coaching without people who have been displaced by downsizing and transitions. And so many folks are shattered, not just because the fear of they've lost their weight, their income, et cetera, but their identity is so closely tied to that job and that role. And their core powers and abilities didn't shift, the situation shifts. So rebuilding that is so important. And if you can, you're giving the students a tremendous gift by infusing that early on in their career, like building your foundation. You are more than one thing. You are more one thing, and be portable with that. And then because I have the floor for 2 seconds, I'm going to take advantage of it. I was curious after this epic health and life-changing event on every level, were you already in the wellness area or you gravitated towards that because this was your new calling to bring that forward to people?
Yeah, I wasn't already in that area. I was living in DC working as doing consultant work with
Okay.
government agencies and education and universities and whatnot. And then when I moved, we left DC to move to New Mexico, our favorite place in the whole world, and we were able to find a house in Santa Fe and rebuild our life. And then I took a good pulse on like where I was, right? Like, okay, now I have this, the health condition is not limiting. It is a limiting factor, but I don't think of it like that. I think like, oh, it gets an opportunity. This is the dancing and a lot of therapy that helps. This is an opportunity for me to really slow down, to take a easier pass at this phase of my life. And I have two small children, and then I was like, I can't work on East Coast time practically. My husband also works on East Coast time. Who's going to take our kids to school? We're on Mountain Time. We're 2 hours behind that. And then this opportunity presented itself for the wellness center, and the wellness center is relatively new. I've been in the role for a year and a half, and it was created, to bring these three different departments together. And what's cool about this position was that there wasn't a vision for like how wellness is defined by the college. My direct supervisor said, that's for the director to decide. So I'd spent a lot of time thinking about this, like how do we incorporate holistic wellness beyond just mental health, which is what we typically think of, but like, food is medicine, and financial well-being, and like all the other components of what makes us light up as people. So yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah. And I think it also goes to show, thanks, Julienne, for that, because, one of the things that we often talk about here on the podcast or with our clients actually is the power of these stories that we have, and to sort of, I sort of view stories as something that allows you, when you look back at them, to be able to kind of see your path. So in other words, we're always on a path, and I love what you said. Where I am is where I am, right? Today, that's where I am, and there you go. And it's not really more complicated than that. But I think the power of storytelling is, you kind of, it gives you the power to look back and to sort of understand how you got somewhere. And so I appreciate you having that follow-up question, Julienne, and then you, LaNysha, answering that way, because it's helpful even in our minds as listeners to sort of see, oh, that's how you got from here to here. And that's, I think, for potentially very inspiring for people. It can kind of open doors to people about how they think about their own personal experiences, and seeing another person go through something, and then that leads to the next chapter of your life. And we get to make that up as human beings, right? We get to make up that story. It's just simply based on what happened to us. But anyway, I digress, because we love this topic. But I'm curious, going back to one of the terms you mentioned, and I wanted to hear more about this, was radical interrogation, I think is what you said. And I'm curious how you invite people into such a space. Because I would imagine that if you talk about to someone, I'm going to have a radical interrogation session with you, I could imagine it might be a little intimidating. So I wonder how.
As an HR person, I can tell you that would not be a big crowd pleaser if you put that out in a memo.
No, that would
You
not
know,
be a crowd pleaser.
So I'd love to hear more. I mean, I'm only being facetious here, but we do hear, in our world, certainly. I was talking to someone the other day who was talking about radical listening, and having radical conversations and all that, radical honesty, but again, we love on this show to take terms like this and sort of really try to define them for our audience, so that they feel like, okay, I know what that means now. And so I'd love to hear a little more. And how do people kind of interact with that? What's the intention when one goes through such a session, or however you want?
Yeah, it's really the complete idea is like radical interrogation of self. So,
Mm,
I should unpack that, or I should say radical self-interrogation. But what's funny about it is this idea that, we don't really ask ourselves why we believe what we believe. Typically, we do not. I think some things, some aspects of our identity we take for granted. And this radical interrogation idea is really to kind of disrupt that a little bit. Like, okay, well, why? If I were to say to myself, like, hey, I have this new label. I do. I have a new label. It's called dilated cardiomyopathy. You go to the doctor, you need a script. They have to give you the label so that you can get the care you need for yourself. And also, it helps classify like where you are in the ejection fraction of the heart. It does this, and here's all these metrics, right, to support that label. I think that when I'm talking about interrogating the oneself and how those labels are fixed to us sometimes, because that's what happened. I have this new label. For me, it's like, well, okay, now I'm a patient or a disabled, invisibly disabled person with this heart condition. For the rest of my life, I'll have it. So is that me? Is it LaNysha? That label? Is it me? Also, what is that label? What do people with that label have? Here comes Google. Oh, they have shortness of breath. It's very hard for them to do this. They're weak. They can't run. They have to get cleared by their doctor. They have to do all these things. I mean, with that label comes a lot of stuff. I'm not discounting that. And that's like part of how I live my life. I have to manage these things in ways that before I had this label, I did not. But what I'm asking people to do is really think about what are these labels, titles, what are these chapters, and what do they mean for you? And so one way I invite people to like start that process is by first identifying like what might be some of the labels that that are affixed to you. And then to think about maybe 3 words that describe who you are beyond your role or beyond that label. Because it's like about what's true to you if that label went away or if it shifted. What's true for you? And maybe it's like I'm a foodie. I love all the restaurants and foods. I'm very curious, and I'm so curious I start doing crazy things like, Goldilocks. And you start getting really you have curiosity, you really can play that up. And I love learning, right? And I love people, I love connecting, and there are essences about us as people. And I think we sometimes just have to step outside of the label, step outside of this, whatever it is, to really see ourselves, like our sense of self, in a very positive way, but also a real way. Because maybe we don't feel good about ourselves, also,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Or maybe we feel down because now we have this thing that we can't, that we didn't control. So
Mm.
it's important to identify it and for us to get to put words to it, right? To voice it.
Mm. I love that. I love that. I wonder, I know one of the things that Julienne loves is examples. I'm gonna
Yes,
get into
backstories
your
and
territory,
examples.
Julian, if
Yes,
that's okay. Well, because we talked about
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
talked
yeah.
about the Me Power framework that you've created and designed, and I'd love to hear an example of maybe someone who's gone through that with you or through this Me Power framework, and how did that sort of support them in their life or career?
Yeah, for sure. So one example I have is probably my favorite one, where this person was trying to figure out, they're a restaurant worker, like front of house hostess. And the hostess is, like, depending on the establishment, you might get at the end of the night get tipped out. But sometimes depending on where you work, they keep the tips, the servers keep the tips. And if you're a host, you just get paid minimum wage. I think that's
Yes.
important for context.
Mm-hmm.
Been there, done that.
Right, most of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, we worked in the restaurant industry. And she really wanted to, get out of that as a grind, because in order to make ends meet, she had to have multiple jobs, so she was going all around. This was in New York. And she came to me with this idea of like, "Hey, I wanna go back to school. I don't know what I might be able to study." And so I kind of, we first started with focusing on her strengths. This is like the Me Power, wheel, as I like to say. But you start there so that you can understand, like, okay, you have some barriers, you have some things you want to get around, but what within you is going to help you do that? So focusing on your strength is like one of the pillars. And so we start doing that, and like I gave her this assessment. She starts going through this process of seeing what she really loves, and it turns out she really had a like in her heart, she really loved taking a closer look at pictures, and really meticulous with detail. And we just started looking at the website to see, well, what other careers might you pick? And sonography stood out to her. Also, you can become a sonographer by going to a 2-year institution, and it won't take a long time. So then we started mapping out a plan for that. And once she identified what her strengths were, she was really able to say, okay, well, now I'm going to pinpoint this. Now we have to identify the barriers. Okay, you work these 3 jobs. How are you going to go to school? How are you going to make that happen? So we came up with a game plan for like how she can kind of get through that reality of figuring out those jobs. Like, maybe I just do 2 jobs and then I find a job at school, which is what she ended up
Mm.
doing. So it was so cool. Like, those are 2 aspects of the Me Power wheel. And then I worked with this person for 8 months, and what was awesome about it was we identified the program, and then we started taking action right away. I think, to your point, a lot of times when we're like feeling confused about where we want to go, or maybe we're bogged down by the story we're telling ourselves, right? I'm not able to do this. I'm stuck. I can't move. I don't know what to do. And that may be true. You may be all those things, but the best antidote to that is to take action in ways that move the needle just a little bit. And so what was awesome about this process, right, of taking action even when confused, even when you're not certain how it's going to work out, right? Because it took her 2 years to get certified. She finished all her classes in like a year and a half, part-time. She was able to take state board, get certified. Now she works at one of the hospitals, and she has the one job, like, and that creates so much opening for her life. But what did that do for her as a human being? Well, it helped her feel more grounded in who she was and what she was about, and the kind of change she wants to make in life. And from that empowered place, she can do even more great things like in the world. And so I think there's a lot to say about that as an example, but that's probably like the best one. And I only talked about 2 of the 5, aspects of me power, but those are like, that's like clear in my mind.
Mm.
And what struck me, and it's a wonderful example of really shifting possibilities and where you are and thinking, "Oh, I'm stuck in this zone and it's overwhelming," except it's also it sounds like what you've provided, as so does every good coach, is a way to kind of question tribal thinking. Like, we are a part of tribes, whether we realize it or not. The neighborhood we grow up, the economic, our history, the dynamics in the house, like how we look at work, ourselves, what's allowable. So you are saying, let's take a look outside of this and rewrite the script. So I think that is wonderful. And then you helped her not just say, "Well, go off you go now, make it up for yourself." You shepherd her along the way and helped her break through some of those things.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I, of course, I wish we had time to go through all the pillars of the framework, but that's what links and LinkedIn and things like that are for. And so I'd love to actually give you the floor, LaNysha, in terms of, what would you want to leave our listeners with, whether that's a resource or website. The floor is yours.
It goes by so fast, so
I know.
quickly.
We know. So-
We barely scratched the surface here, but I want to leave listeners with um with this idea that, you know, I think we take ourselves for granted so much. And I just want to encourage folks to just remember one great thing about yourself. And if you cannot, you can ask someone that you know, like, and trust. And that, I think it's important for us to remember ourselves and remember how we light up a room or how we're lit up in a room. Because that feeling is, we take it for granted, but really that feeling is like connecting us with what's good in the world. I mean, the world is on fire in a lot of ways. And so if we can have just a slice of that, I think it's going to enrich us so much and enrich our community and all the things that make us all good. I really believe that folks can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's like my number one platform where I'm most active. But I'm also on all the socials, IG and all that, at EdLinguist. And then in the show notes, folks can um, get my links and connect with me. And I always respond, and I'm always happy to talk to folks.
That's
Fantastic.
terrific.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been just a real pleasure. I wish we did have more time. Maybe we'll do a part 2 one of these
Yes.
days. But I highly, highly encourage all our listeners to go and check out Dr. LaNysha Adams, as you just said, on LinkedIn, and also on the website and links. Websites and links that are on in today's episode notes. And I want to remind our listeners that if you've been inspired by this session, you can consider enrolling yourself in one of Narrative's programs, whether that's group training or one-on-one coaching. We really help people to kind of look at their stories and, whether that's their origin story and that led them to where they are now, but how to unpack their experience and then craft it into a compelling story. And we've got a few things that are available right now on our website, especially with the New Mexico State University's Global Campus, where we created an on-demand, self-paced storytelling training where you'll learn to find, craft, and tell those kinds of stories for interviews, leadership presence, pitches. Really, it's got a vast array of applications. And for listeners that are right here, right now, you can use code NARRATIVE, NARATIV, for a special 25% discount. So definitely check that link out in the episode notes. Otherwise, we're always very, very happy to do this in real life and in person. So if you have a team or an organization that you think would be interested in this, please come our way. We're always ready to listen to you. And as always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, your favorite podcast platform, and check out our YouTube channel as well. And with that, I want to thank my wonderful co-host, Julienne, for once
Thank
again
you.
being with me today.
Yes.
And thanks again, Dr. LaNysha Adams, for being with us today. And we'll see you all next time.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.